of the school to prison pipeline. And it just rolls off of people's tongue. It rolls the school to prison pipeline. Just like mass incarceration, just rolls off of people's tongue without them really thinking about what they're saying. The school to prison pipeline is real. It's not ethereal, right? It's real. I have 5 reports that's been done by scholars, and they all include the same thing. The most significant event that will impact and predict who goes to prison is a child being suspended from school. One school suspension in a child's educational lifespan puts them at greater risk of academic failure, of being labeled as truant, because all suspended days are unexcused, and 10 unexcused absences can result in you being labeled truant. Once you're labeled truant, you can be brought into the juvenile justice system because the school can file a status petition against the parent and the child. Now you're brought into the juvenile justice system. Once you get in that system, well, life takes on its own trend in terms of how you can progress into that system. So school suspension is the first step of a child literally moving from the school to the prison pipeline. And anyone who's done any research around this, they know it. And so when we talk about trying to address over-incarceration, I don't like to use the term mass incarceration. I like to use the term that black people are over-arrested and targeted for arrest. They're overcharged in many cases in the court system, and that results in them being over-incarcerated in the system. And I'm trying to get people to realize the only way that we can curtail that is we've got to turn back the valve. As long as kids are being suspended from school, they're going to head into the juvenile justice system. And they're going to matriculate and graduate into adult prison industrial complex. And as long as the pipeline is open of kids being suspended, kids dropping out, kids going to the juvenile justice system, kids aged out of the juvenile justice system, kids aged out of the child foster care system, those are the streams of young people that are headed for prison. And they will continue to head for prison until something is done at the local school level to keep kids in school and on task, and to break the cycle of them entering into the juvenile justice system. And that's why I call this the silent, underlying social condition, unaddressed, not fully been understood, right, and really unrecognized. And when you look at some specific data, here's what you find. McDowell County, right, way down under, one of the poorest counties in the entire United States of America, McDowell County, with the lowest academic achievement now of children in the public school system, McDowell County. McDowell County, which has the lowest rate of kids going to post-secondary education, McDowell County. McDowell County has one of the highest poverty rates, one of the lowest life expectancies, the lowest per capita income, the highest rate of poverty in the state, McDowell County. Let me say something else McDowell County has. It has the highest rate of children referred for discipline, being disciplined, and suspended from school. The highest rate in the whole state of West Virginia is McDowell County. And you see this nexus between school suspension, low academic performance, low income, poverty, high juvenile incarceration, high rates of people moving to prison, but also you see low life expectancy. The communities with the poorest education have the lowest life expectancy. There's a direct link between education levels, income levels, and life expectancy. So that's why with tremendous passion and energy, I've been trying to bring attention to this school suspension issue, because it's something that has to be addressed at the local school level. Kids are suspended from a local school. They are suspended by a principal or by a vice principal who is responsible for discipline. And the only way to correct it is a school-by-school basis. So in kind of closing this narrative here, is that understanding that when we lost segregated schools, we lost the second, arguably, the second most influential institution in our community, right? The big three, right, is the family, the church, and the schools. And historically, those three work in unison, nurturing, educating, supporting, discipline, caring for the kids. And they had this transcendent commitment that all the children would do well. And now what we have is dysfunction, right? Dysfunction in families. Many single female household families, many families where there's domestic violence, many families where there's child abuse and neglect. It's just the reality of what we're living with. And like this community here on the west side of Charleston has been traumatized by violence. And I started sharing publicly what I wouldn't share with people. The impact that violence has had on me after serving in this community, when we moved our church over here around about 1994 and really being deeply involved in this neighborhood. And then after moving inside of the community, and after doing all of these funerals for young people that have been murdered, that have been shot, that have died from drug overdoses, right? And you don't realize the cumulative effect that it has on you personally as you try not to be overwhelmed by the grief of the people, but at the same time, your compassion causes you to feel some of their pain as you're trying to minister to them. And I began to realize that I had been traumatized and everybody over here had been traumatized. And that a lot of the anger among our children is because they've been traumatized and they don't know how to process the way they feel in terms of what they've seen, what they've heard, what they've been exposed to, and the number of funerals that they have attended. And it results in anger. And this is the angriest group of kids I've ever seen in my life. And they have a right to be angry because they have been robbed of what is supposed to be a birthright, and that is a childhood of innocence. And then I had to come to grips and acknowledge within myself that I had this deep anger that was smoldering inside of me, right? The anger over not being able to move the system, the frustration of not being able to get the fraternities and the sororities and the lodges and the black upper middle class and the black elite to recognize that we have a crisis in our neighborhood and our children are caught up in a vortex of dysfunction and they need real advocacy. What they need is more than just drive-by community service to show up in your colors and take a picture. They need for you to engage and fight this system to treat them more humanely and more decently, right? And to not be able to move them, not to not be to move the ministers, to realize that we're supposed to be the prophetic voices, that we're supposed to be the courageous warriors, and that we're supposed to run into the battle if necessary, and to take the shots if necessary, to make sure that at least the pain of our people are legitimized. Going to the legislature for 23 years and seeing the obstinance and the resistance and the indifference toward anything that would do anything for black people specifically and poor people in general. And seeing the economic exploitation that takes place in this community. And I call this community an economic transfer center. All of the transfer payments that come in, SNAP, whether it's Social Security checks, whether it's temporary assistance to needy families, and even the wages that the people in the community make. Our money doesn't spend a night in this neighborhood, right? Because there are very few black-owned businesses in the neighborhood except for a funeral home, a couple of beauty shops, a couple of barber shops, and a barbecue place. And almost all the other businesses are people that are just interlopers. They got businesses here, land and property here. They don't live here. They have no invested interest in the neighborhood. And I tell people, I got my economics lesson standing in the Kroger's on Delaware Avenue, West Side Economics. And I was in there several years ago, picked up a few items, and I don't like to use credit cards. I don't like to use debit cards. I like to use cash because I spend with cash. I'm not going to overspend. So I'm standing in the line, and I may be the most impatient person that I know. And I'm going from line to line trying to get out quicker. And finally, I realize it's the first of the month. There is no quick line. So I stay in line. I'm behind this little mother, and she got 3 children. She got one shorty underneath the buggy. She got one shorty sitting in the part where you put soda pop and stuff like that. She got another standing beside him. She goes through the line and she takes this card and she gives it, put it in the machine, and it processes her bill. And it comes at almost $300. And then I go through my few items, maybe $35. As I'm walking out, I'm thinking about what just happened. And I said, okay, she gave them that card. All right, my mama had food stamps before they were commodities. Now they got this card. They call it SNAP card, supplemental nutrition program, something like that. You know, I thought about what had happened. She just spent $330 on a card. That money was electronically transferred from wherever the government deposits that money into Kroger's bank somewhere outside the state. The money never even came to the neighborhood or the community. No black hand ever touched it. Just so happened the Brink trucks to come and take the cash, they happened to be there as I was walking out. The armed guard standing there, and they're walking out carrying bags of money. And it hit me. There go my money. It would be in one of those bags. I just spent it here at Kroger. Now it's in a money bag. It's going into the truck. It's going downtown to be deposited in a downtown bank. And I'll never see it again. And I began to realize this is what's happening to us. So I came back to my office, said to my assistant, I want you to do an economic analysis. I want you to find the data, how much money comes into the West Side in salaries, income to the people, and how much business is there transacted on the West Side on a yearly basis. Here's what she came back with. There's $350 million in wages and salaries that the people of the West Side that pass through their hands every year, $350 million. And there's some $370 million in business activity on the West Side of Charleston. So we're talking about close to $750 million transferred through this West Side. We're not a poor community. We're just an economic transfer center. And we're just a place where money is transferred through us. And there's no intent to build an economy that will benefit the people in this neighborhood, in this community. And it's understanding those type things that causes me to have such passion and to be, as Martin Luther King said, of having this fierce sense of the urgency of now. We can't wait another day, right? People are hurting now. The oppression, the exploitation, it's real. And it manifests itself really in the most marginalized group of people. And the most marginalized group of people in our community are our children. And lastly, right now in West Virginia, the greatest opportunity in the history of the state of West Virginia for an economic renaissance, the greatest opportunity to get something like reparations to occur. And I cannot get a handful of black people to pay attention to what's happening. Anytime there is a major episodic crisis, a flood, an earthquake, a pandemic, it forces a response from the federal government because the federal government is the only governmental entity that has the resources that can respond. And that was the case with COVID-19. Unprecedented pandemic, unprecedented response. Billions of dollars the federal government has sent to state, county, and local governments. The state of West Virginia, $1.25 billion in CARES Act money in 2020 that came in under the Trump administration. The governor basically controlled all of that money, and much of it was squandered away on frivolous, silly, stupid things. The baby bulldog COVID-19 lottery and some other questionable expenditures. The people said basically nothing. The elected leaders said basically nothing. The preacher said basically nothing. Only a little group of us started raising the issue about the need for economic justice, fairness, and equity 3 years ago. The next year, 2021, the federal government opened up its largesse again. It sends $800 million to the public school system to be divided among the 55 counties. It sent $2 billion that was divided among the county and city governments for them to allocate. It sent another $1.335 billion to the state government. And with the American Rescue Act plan, in that statute, it specifically said that the state should use some of this money, the county should use some of this money, the city should use some of this money and invest it in heavily populated minority communities that have been long time underserved and where all these disparities exist. That's in the federal statute.